CNN host Michael Smearkanish offered us here what is one of the dumbest takes I've ever heard in my life. That's not hyperbole. And you're seeing a dynamic unfold of mainstream media trying to portray obstructionist, extremist, corrupt Democrats as heroes. So let's take a look at what he said, and then I'm going to come back and absolutely rip it to shreds.
Senators Manchin and Sinema, the problem or the solution? I'm Michael Smearkanish in Philadelphia. It's been a roller coaster of a week in Washington as Democrats tried to advance a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed with bipartisan support and a more ambitious $3.5 trillion expansion of the societal safety net that lacks a single Republican supporter. In the end, Speaker Pelosi, having given problem solvers her word, still couldn't deliver a vote. There are 535 members of Congress, but two held the most sway. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. The political game of chicken between House progressives and moderates was actually dependent upon these two senators, whose votes are needed for the larger package to get through the Senate via reconciliation, which requires every single Democratic vote plus Vice President Kamala Harris. Manchin released a statement earlier in the week, and he said this: "I can't support $3.5 trillion more in spending when we have already spent $5.4 trillion since last March. At some point, all of us, regardless of party, must ask the simple question, how much is enough? What I have made clear to the president and Democratic leaders is that spending trillions more on new and expanded government programs when we can't even pay for the essential social programs like Social Security and Medicare is the definition of fiscal insanity." Sinema held her cards closer to the vest, tweeting that in August, she had shared her detailed concerns and priorities, including dollar figures, with President Biden and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Here's an indication of her importance. This week, Biden and his aides met with Sinema 4 times in one day. For their attempts to grapple with the actual numbers and cost, both Sinema and Manchin incurred the wrath of the party's more progressive elements. But Manchin and Sinema are deserving of our praise, not our criticism. Their refusal to simply fall in line and instead exhibit some independence is both a rarity in Washington and a reflection of their diverse constituencies. Consider that Sinema's Arizona constituents pretty evenly divide between R's and D's and I's. In Manchin's case, he represents a state that Donald Trump won by nearly 39 points, and where R's outnumber the D's, and independents are about 1/5 of the population. Plus, who wouldn't want what's in the so-called Build Back Better plan? 2 free years of community college, child care and universal pre-K, Medicare expansion for dental, hearing, and vision, extended child tax credit, paid family and medical leave, clean electricity. The question is whether we can afford it. There really hasn't been a serious conversation about the nation's debt and deficit since the so-called Simpson-Bowles Commission, created by President Obama to identify, quote, policies to improve the fiscal situation in the medium term and to achieve fiscal sustainability over the long run. That failed to gain traction back in 2010. But it doesn't mean that the issue has gone away. Our national debt is currently $28.8 trillion. That's over $86,000 for every single person in America. From our first president, George Washington, until our 42nd, Bill Clinton, a span of 211 years, the United States accumulated $5 trillion of national debt. During the administration of President George W. Bush, the national debt grew from 5 to 11 trillion. Then under President Barack Obama, the national debt jumped from 11 trillion to 20 trillion. And in the one term of President Donald Trump, the national debt grew from 20 trillion to nearly 28 trillion. No wonder then that the Wall Street Journal said Democrats may be angry, but as the days go by, they may recognize that Mr. Manchin is doing them a favor. With President Biden abdicating to the left, the West Virginian is providing a reality check on progressive excess. To that point, I would add, Bernie didn't win the election. Biden did. And a large part of his appeal was that he was the most moderate voice on the Democratic stage. The power held by Manchin and Sinema reminds me of something called the Fulcrum Project. That's an idea from a centrist independent group called Unite America. Board member Neil Simon himself, a former Senate candidate, has often said that the power in the Senate could be wielded by a handful of independent thinkers. Imagine, for example, if Manchin and Sinema were to join forces with, say, Senator Lisa Murkowski and another Republican or two. If such a group were to deny both parties a majority and commit to sticking together, they could dictate what gets to the floor, who is the majority leader, and fashion moderate solutions to big problems. And that, I say, would be a great day for the country.
That's what they do now. That's exactly what's happening now. And how does the world look? How's our current political situation and economic situation and global situation and climate situation and corruption situation? He's like, wouldn't it be great if we lived in the world that we lived in, where a couple of assholes controlled everything? Now, notice something. he doesn't bring up a single poll number on how the Build Back Better plan, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, is. He doesn't bring up a single number on that. Not a single one. Okay. Well, I'm going to show you. Look at this. Long-term care. It's plus 68. That's elder care, by the way. It's 80% support. Modernizing the electricity grid, plus 58. 74% support. Modernizing K-12 schools, plus 55, 73% support. Pathway to citizenship, plus 33, 61% support. Universal pre-K, plus 31, 60% support. Civilian climate corps, plus 29, 59% support. Tuition-free community college, plus 26, 59% support. Lowering Medicare eligibility age, plus 26, 58% support. Extending child tax benefits, plus 15, 53% support. This doesn't even include other very popular provisions, like lowering drug prices, which is even more popular, and there's a new poll that says it's the number one issue for Americans is lowering prescription drug prices. This doesn't include paid family leave and paid medical leave, both over 70% support. And remember, these things are in the bill. There was a poll of Arizonans, and they found that I think it's 89% want to lower prescription drug prices. So when people like Michael Smirkanish make the argument, they're just, idiot, lefty, you don't even know how this works. Obviously, Manchin and Sinema are just representing their constituents in Arizona, which is a purple state, and it's not a far left state. That is factually wrong. They say that all the time. They trot out that stale, incorrect, factually wrong argument all the time. They did it in the $15 minimum wage debate, where they said, Joe Manchin is just trying to represent his own constituents in West Virginia. They're not like you lefties. Meanwhile, poll showed $15 minimum wage was popular in West Virginia. It's popular. So understand, guys, he's either the dumbest man in America or he's a liar. He frames the conversation like it's an honest ideological disagreement between, the mob of unruly Democrats and then the independent, reasonable, above the fray thinkers, the philosopher types like Manchin and Sinema. This is not what's going on. They're corrupt. They have conflicts of interest. How do you do a whole segment on Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin and you don't mention a single conflict of interest? Not one. And they have them all over the place. Guys, Kyrsten Sinema, we just got this reporting in the other day. Credit to David Sirota and the Daily Poster. $750,000 she took from Big Pharma. And then, lo and behold, even though she previously supported lowering drug prices, now all of a sudden she says, I want that out of the bill. I don't want lower drug prices in the bill. I don't want negotiations in the bill. She just took the money and just flipped her position. That is rank corruption. It's legalized bribery right in front of your face. When she was supposed to be in Washington, D.C., she left to go to a cocktail fundraiser where all the corporations against this piece of legislation lined up to give her $5,800 a pop. Michael Smirkanish had nothing to say about any of that. He had nothing to say about Joe Manchin and the new revelations in the great Intercept article called, I think, Joe Manchin's Dirty Empire, where they found that him and his family, I think it's over $5 million that they've made from fossil fuels. So if he were to support climate provisions, which fight back against climate change and try to get us to a clean energy future, it would tank his own personal wealth and his own portfolio and his family's. By the way, his daughter was a key player in a pharmaceutical company that was price gouging people. It was the whole EpiPen scandal. They have her on email, dead to rights, saying, how do we come up with a rationale to jack up the prices on this thing? He has nothing to say about any of that. You consider yourself a journalist, you consider yourself a reporter, and you're not telling the real story of what goes on behind the scenes? You think they just have an honest ideological disagreement where they think the American people are wrong about everything. Americans are wrong about long-term care, modernizing the electricity grid, universal pre-K, pathway to citizenship, civilian climate corps, free community college, lower Medicare eligibility age, extending the child tax benefit. He makes it seem like they should be praised for taking this massively unpopular position when, again, the reason they take that position is because they're corrupt and they've been bought. And also this idea, we need to attack this idea that somehow being independent is in and of itself virtuous. No, the details matter, Michael Smirkanish. Somebody could be an independent-minded thinker in D.C. and support segregation. Oh, look at how independent they are. They're the only person remaining in D.C. that supports segregation. I applaud you. Well, you'd look at that and you'd say, that's stupid. That's a stupid argument because obviously segregation is immoral and unethical. But it doesn't occur to Michael Smirkanish that perhaps being against lower drug prices is also immoral and unethical. And by the way, how many people are going to die because Kyrsten Sinema decided to get paid? I mean, this is pathetic. And by the way, the like to dislike on this video is astounding. It's like only maybe 10 or 20% likes, 80, 90% dislikes, because everybody sees through it. I don't care if you're on the left or on the right. You know that what this guy's saying is total bullshit. And the final point I'll make is this we can't afford it argument. Nobody ever said a single word about affording it when it came to the military budget and when it came to Wall Street bailouts. By the way, since 2001, the Pentagon has spent $14 trillion. None of it paid for. None of it paid for. And he never said anything about that. Most people never said anything when Donald Trump in 2017 passed a tax cut for the wealthy, which added trillions to the debt and the deficit, and 83% of those benefits went to the top 1% of income earners. See, this is how you know the game is rigged. Those things, none of those things are paid for, and they get a total pass. Why? Because these are prioritized. It's a sacred cow. You cannot touch military spending. That's how they frame it. Well, guess what? What if I tell you it's a sacred cow, people's health care? And by the way, it should be. I don't care if that costs money. But by the way, it doesn't even cost money in this bill. They offset it with tax increases. And that's the other dirty trick. And by the way, tax increases on the wealthy. But that's the other dirty trick that Manchin and Sinema engage in. They go, we can't add so much to the debt and the deficit. So we can't do this. It needs to be paid for. Everything has to be paid for. And then the left goes, okay, we'll pay for it. Let's raise tax on corporations and billionaires and the top 1%. And then Manchin and Sinema go, no. You just said it has to be paid for because you care about the debt and the deficit. Then we proposed the pay fors and you're like, no. By the way, the only other way to pay for it is what? Cut spending in other areas. That's not a good idea. You have to cut other social safety net programs and things of that nature. Or raise taxes on working people. And that's what these people support. Cut popular social safety net programs or raise taxes on working people. As opposed to raising taxes on the wealthy to pay for a popular agenda. Do you understand, guys, what's happening here? Do you understand? There's a handful of so-called moderates, they're not, they're extremists and they're corrupt corporatists who are blowing up everything to represent industry, to represent big business. Anybody who's telling you otherwise is either a liar or a colossal idiot. In the case of Michael Smirkanish, I don't know, I'll leave it up to you. He doesn't seem like he's that bright. He seems like he's Wolf Blitzer level intellect. So perhaps he's just a moron, but, what's better and what's worse? I don't know. Is it better to be that dim and that unintelligent? Or is it better to be a totally vicious, cutthroat liar? But it's definitely one or it's definitely the other. Because you know what? There's no way you could do that long of a segment and you could portray these people as heroes without bringing up the conflicts of interest and the corruption. This isn't some honest ideological disagreement. Not even close. And there's a reason why he buried all of the provisions that are incredibly popular. There's a reason he didn't bring up any numbers. Because when you bring up those numbers, you see, wow, it is wholly unreasonable to be against those basic things. Things that would move us slightly in the direction of being like every other developed country. This is manufacturing consent. This is controlling the debate. This is limiting the spectrum of what people are allowed to say. And this is considered the enlightened, reasonable, above the fray, moderate, centrist position. No, what if I told you this bill is moderate and centrist? What if I told you that? Because that's the reality. It's right smack dab in the center of mainstream American opinion. Now, that's the commentary that's accurate. And nobody in mainstream media is giving you that commentary. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.